the UK government continues to involve itself in evil acts. In this case, the medical industry of the British Empire once again flexed its muscles, wielding dictatorial control over the most helpless, the most vulnerable of its citizens, those who desperately need medical care. The UK government, you see, has sided with doctors who have deemed a desperate 19-year-old woman as unworthy of life-saving medical care. What in the world is wrong with these people? Well, that, my friends, is going to be the topic of today's episode. And so, from the topical umbrella, I am Adrian. This is my show, The Place, where we cover everything. So shortly after the filming of this episode, news reports came out that the woman known as ST has now died. Now, this is outrageous. She spent her final moments, her final days, not fighting the illness, the disease, but rather having to fight the doctors and the courts over whether she was mentally capable of being allowed to fight her illness rather than just, give up and die. This is everything wrong with the UK and their healthcare system. This is something that, frankly, should be terrifying to anyone of sound mind. The government should never, ever be allowed the right to tell you whether you get to live or die. With the exception of maybe if we're talking about the death penalty and criminality, but that's a whole nother argument for a whole nother day. The bottom line is, this is entirely insidious, and it is so sad that her parents, her family, not only had to suffer through all of this, but thanks to the court's order, we're not even allowed to speak about it publicly. This whole story is outrageous and infuriating to a degree I can't even begin to explain. So, with that being said, let's get back to the rest of the episode. And, all right, past me. Take it from here. In yet another horror story from the UK, we have a court which has sided with doctors and their desire to see this girl dead by stopping treatment and pursuing end-of-life care. This so-called teen, a 19-year-old woman who they have dehumanized under the guise of anonymity by calling her ST, has, according to reports, a rare genetic mitochondrial disease that is progressively degenerative. This again is according to court documents. Now, this poor 19-year-old woman has spent the past year in the ICU and is fully dependent on a ventilator and feeding tube to survive. According to the New York Post, she requires regular dialysis due to chronic kidney damage from the disease and wants to travel to Canada for experimental treatment for her illness. But almost unbelievably, these so-called doctors that are overseeing her stay at the hospital do not want her to receive experimental care. But why? Well, who the hell really knows? Oh wait, no, we do know. You see, they believe that she is, quote, actively dying, and that she has no hope for care to resume life outside of intensive care. Who the hell gives these people the right to decide who doesn't deserve to fight for their lives? Oh wait, that's right, the UK court system gives them the power. You see, these monsters, these so-called doctors of this hospital, have asked the court to end her dialysis treatments and pursue palliative care instead. Now, for those who don't know, palliative care is a specialized medical care for people living with serious illness. This type of care is focused on providing relief from the symptoms and stress of the illness. The goal is to improve quality of life for both the patient and the family. At least that is the official definition. In this case, it's just let her die. Anyway, the hospital told the court that the 19-year-old woman is incapable of making decisions about her future. Why, you might ask? Well, because they say she is under the delusion that her death is not imminent. Imagine that. However, as the New York Post reported, the teen, who comes from a strong Christian family, confessed she realizes that the treatment may not help extend her life, but she wants to keep on fighting. She said, "This is my wish. I want to die trying to live. We have to try everything." Now, her family has spent their entire life savings to treat their girl. This according to the Christian Legal Center. who also said that they want to go public to raise funds for the expensive treatment, but they cannot due to a, quote, transparency order requested by this hospital, which bars reporting any information which might identify so-called ST, the 19-year-old girl, her family, or the hospital. Because of course they are. Now, the girl's family described the long battle with the hospital as a year of continuous torture for them. They said, "Not only are we anxious about our beloved daughter's fight for survival, but we have also been cruelly gagged from being able to speak about her situation. We are not allowed to ask people for prayers or for help, which she desperately needs. It is a matter of life and death for our daughter to raise money for treatment in Canada, so these arbitrary reporting restrictions are literally killing her." Now, my friends, this is precisely what happens when you give bureaucrats the power over your life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The fact that they treat this poor woman as less deserving of life than anyone else is monstrous. And yet, this should hardly come as a surprise. In fact, as sad as it is to say, this isn't even the first time that this has happened in this country. Do any of you remember someone named Charlie Gard or Alfie Evans, two little children from 2017 and 2018, respectively? Well, to refresh everyone's memory, let's go back in time and take a look at the beginning of this ever-growing nightmare in the UK. First, there's Charlie Gard, a little boy born with a rare genetic condition who was not allowed the chance to see his first birthday. You see, he was suffering from MDDS, just like the 19-year-old woman that we've been discussing so far. Now, while it is true that hope was faint, there was a neurologist in New York who was working on an experimental treatment based on nucleoside supplementation with human MDDS. And so he was contacted. The neurologist and the hospital where poor Charlie was being held at, the so-called Great Ormond Street Hospital, which doesn't seem to have anything great about it indeed, they agreed to proceed with the treatment. As part of their agreement, it would be conducted at the Gosh Hospital, and it was going to be paid for by the NHS. So far so good, right? Sadly though, not long after this agreement was reached, the little boy suffered seizures, which caused brain damage. So, the Great Ormond Street Hospital deemed that further treatment was futile and might prolong suffering. So, they began discussions with the parents about ending life support and providing palliative care. The parents, though, didn't want to give up on their little boy, and instead wanted at least to try this experimental treatment. And so, they raised their own funds for a transfer to a hospital in New York. But unbelievably, these evil doctors took the parents to court to force the death of their child. And wouldn't you know it, the courts callously agreed, dooming this child. In the parents' final court appearance, Yates, the mother of little Charlie Gard, supported by her husband and father of little Charlie, said this: "Mommy and Daddy love you so much, Charlie. We always have and we always will. And we are so sorry that we couldn't save you, but we weren't allowed to. Sweet dreams, baby. Sleep tight, our beautiful little boy." Now, according to reports at the time, emotions were high outside the Royal Courts of Justice, central London. When the news filtered out, there was anger and tears among protesters who had kept up a vigil with people chanting, "Shame on you, judge," and "Shame on Gosh," the hospital chain. There was even members of a US pro-life group who flew over to side with Charlie's parents, and they could be seen holding hands and praying. And so the little boy died, but he wouldn't be the only one. Just 1 year later, we once again found the corrupt national health care system of the UK sentence yet another little child to death. This time, the case of Alfie Evans. CNN's article said that Wednesday's ruling rejected new arguments intended to overturn a decision by the High Court on Tuesday that prevented the terminally ill toddler from leaving Britain for medical treatment. Kiska said that we have the right to appeal to the Supreme Court and the European Court. We could seek new medical evidence showing that his condition is improving. Now, Alfie was admitted to Alder Hey Hospital in December of 2016 and was diagnosed with a neurodegenerative disease associated with severe epilepsy and had been in a semi-vegetative state for more than a year at the time. Now, he had been kept alive all this time by artificial ventilation in the critical care unit. According to staff at the hospital, they said that Alfie had received the full support of Alder Hay's medical and nursing teams since being admitted. Sadly, he has remained unresponsive to treatment and his condition has rapidly declined. Now, based on extensive damage on the child's brain, the hospital recommended to the child's parents that active treatment be stopped. But unsurprisingly, the parents disagreed with this, and so they were forced to take the matter to court to rule on whether or not their child would be allowed treatment. And it gets better. The fight was over whether it was in the child's best interest to continue to receive life-saving treatment. What? Now let's skip to this tragic end of this nightmare story. It was suggested that Alfie could be transported to Rome's Bambino Gesù Pediatric Hospital, which is a Vatican hospital and the main pediatric hospital serving southern Italy, for treatment. However, the child's condition was deemed as irreversible and untreatable, this according to a statement from Alder Hay. Now, based in part on evidence supplied by the hospital, the Supreme Court dismissed Alfie's case. High Court Justice Anthony Hayden rejected the plan to take Alfie to Rome and said the order to end Alfie's life support should commence at 9 p.m. on Monday. Now, last-ditch appeals were dismissed, and so at 9:17 that Monday, ventilation was withdrawn. But then something amazing happened. Despite all expectations from these monsters that call themselves doctors overseeing poor little Alfie, he didn't die. He kept breathing. For hours, little Alfie kept breathing unaided, but the hospital staff continued to refuse to provide any more help for the child, either with further ventilation or hydration, despite the little guy coughing. In fact, it wasn't until 2 a.m. that some of the hospital staff broke ranks and offered hydration and oxygen support. And so, that Tuesday, the very next day, the Italian government granted citizenship to Alfie and applied for the Foreign Secretary for permission to intervene to save little Alfie's life. But oh no, we can't have the possibility that the little child might actually live. It would contradict the doctors who said there was no hope. Can't have faith in the medical system challenged. And so the courts would ban travel of the child. This while the little guy was being denied nutrition. Essentially, the hospital, determined to see the little boy die, was letting him starve to death. Breathing on his own? Can't have that. Let him starve to death. And so, sadly, 5 days after being taken off life support, little Alfie would die at 2:30 a.m. on April 28, 2018. His father, Tom Evans, released a statement on Facebook announcing his death. He said this: "My gladiator laid down his shield and gained his wings." Absolutely heartbroken. So what does all of this mean? Well, simply put, once you give power and control over your life and healthcare to an uncaring government that sees people as numbers, or worse still, expenses to be paid, you have an almost certainty that eventually the government will not want to pay to keep people they deem as not productive to society alive. What we're seeing happening here will only accelerate with time as the older generation eventually dies off and the morality that they possessed is lost in time. The younger, more naive, or worse still, mal-educated generation will not know any better, making it easier and easier for the government to choose who lives or dies. What we have been witnessing here has been accelerated tremendously by the Orwellian lockdowns and outright control over the bodily autonomy of practically everyone living in all Western civilizations. What we are witnessing is the beginning of a new tyranny, which many thought that past generations may have, eradicated. You see, in civilized societies, people's dignity and right to life was just assumed to exist. Evil empires of the past, like the Soviet Union, the German Third Reich, and all the horrors that they brought with them were just that, something of the past. Why, it couldn't possibly happen again. Not with, we the new generation so enlightened by modern conveniences and technologies, right? And yet here we are, watching the human race slip into freefall, with an age of darkness knocking at the door, just waiting to be let in. If action is not taken to not only stop the madness, but reverse it, and it isn't done soon, we are looking at a dystopian future that our forefathers fought with every ounce of their beings to prevent. Now, I'm an optimist, my friends, and I believe that this ship can be turned around, and I think that there are plenty of good people that will want to make that happen. But the way forward is going to be fraught with peril, and cowardice must be put aside for the benefit of all mankind. Otherwise, future generations will curse us for doing nothing. Now, regardless of what happens, rest assured on this channel, The Topical Umbrella, I'm going to be keeping an eye on social issues from around the world. I'm going to be giving you the news, and I'm going to be giving you my opinion of the news. I think, based on everything I've seen this last couple of years, with the incredible amount of censorship online, that the more voices we have that are reasoned, that provide hope and truth, the better. So, after 8 months of hiatus, I'm back. And that, my friends, will bring our episode to a close once more. As always, thank you so much for joining me on the program today. From The Topical Umbrella, I am Adrian, and I will see you all next time.